Alrighty, so now that we have everything set up, our procedurals were all replicated and all that kind of stuff, we want to go ahead and start working on some attachments. So to begin, I'm going to start with just something simple. We're going to do an optic and yeah, make it to where we can aim with the optic. So this will be our first introduction into the attachment system. So let's go ahead and begin. So to start, I'm going to go back in our tutorial folder, go to blueprints, and we're just going to make an optic. So we're going to make a new actor class. I'll just call it BP underscore, we'll do red dot. And we'll have a separate one in the future when we do magnified optics. This will just be simply a red dot for now. We'll add a static mesh, which is going to be the optic, and we can go ahead and make it the root. It doesn't need to be the root, but it's recommended. So now we want to grab the optics. So that's in the bundle, meshes, accessories, and there it is. So the T4 site. So we can set that there like so. Oh, it actually has a little reticle on it. And I think all these attachments should be Y forwards, are they? No, this one's X. All right, so that might require a little bit of a workaround. So we'll figure it out. So remember when I mentioned in the very beginning, basically we can have either everything X forward or everything Y forwards. I do not recommend mixing. So this is going to be a case of mixing. So what we can actually do to correct this directly in the engine is load up the mesh, and we go down to our details. Under import, there is a transform. We can adjust the import rotation. So we're just going to go ahead and add 90 degrees, and then we want to build a re-import, but we need to get access to the mesh. So what we can do is export this out. So right click, asset actions, export, and yeah, I'm just going to do it in the content folder. That's fine. And then go ahead and re-import. And you can see it rotated 90 degrees. So to double check, you can see it is now pointing Y forwards. So let's go ahead and save and close. Okay, so now that we have that, in order to make it aimable, we want to add a procedural anim component. So SKG procedural anim, and the only thing we have to really focus on here is going to be the initialization and the aiming settings. Everything else in this case is going to be irrelevant. So what the procedural anim component does is that is what handles making things aimable procedurally. So we have two things. We have the procedural anim component, and we also have an optic component, and they control different things. So the procedural anim component controls the aiming portion. It tells you, where to aim to and all that kind of stuff. While the optic component, that's for handling things like reticles, changing brightness at runtime, changing reticles at runtime, night vision modes, all that kind of stuff. Things that are very, specific to the optic. So to begin, we go ahead, we have our SKG procedural anim selected. We want to make a initialization. So we can go through, and I don't think we ever made one. So let's go ahead and just make one really quick. So in our tutorial, data assets, make a new folder called optic. And in here, I'm going to go to SKG, data assets, optic, procedural anim. We want yes, that is the one that I forgot to make. So we're going to go to data asset, search for procedural anim, and we have our procedural anim initialize. So DA underscore procedural anim init underscore optic. Open that up, and we want to match these up. So we have the net mesh name being static mesh and static mesh, so that's good to go. And we have an aim socket name, so we have s underscore aim. So we want to add that to this mesh. So let's go ahead and load it up. Let's go to the socket manager, create a new one, call it s underscore aim. And then we want to start adjusting this to get it in the center. So I do have some helpers here that'll make this easier. So under this side here, you can tell that this one here is for the red dot. for the reticle itself. So if we search for socket, we have a basically set aim socket material and material instance. If you just set that, you can see it positions a tiny little dot right in the center of the UVs. And that's what we can use to get our aim socket really close with it. So that, to me, looks basically spot on. At least as far as I can tell, because I can barely see the dot. There it is. Yeah, just a tad high. All right, so that's pretty much spot on with the dot. So we can go ahead and save that, save our data asset, and we're just going to go ahead and set it. So now that we have that, we want to work on our aiming settings. So let's go ahead and make one for that. So this one we should have, so SKG data assets, procedure anim, aiming settings, DA underscore aiming settings underscore red dot. Then here we have forward axis, which is Y, the aiming distance, so how far away from the optic do we basically want to be, and use fixed aiming distance. These are the ones that we're going to focus on. The rest we're going to worry about later. So I'll discuss these once we actually get it set up and configured so you can see how they work. So we can save that and plug it in. So we now have our red dot, made. Although I do actually need to change the aim socket back. Or sorry, not the aim socket. Oops, wrong one. Material. Darn. Which one was it? Should be something. Whoops. Materials. Yeah, I can't remember what the, oh well, I'll come back to it. We'll leave that as the aim socket. I can't remember what the actual reticle material was. But anyhow, let's go ahead and see. So we have the red dot made. Now we just want to go ahead and set it up with the attachment manager and the attachment system. So back to tutorial, we're going to go to our BP gun that we made. And we're just going to simply add a SKG attachment manager. And I'll explain what that does here in a bit. So we can leave all that by default. Go to SKG firearm and attachment manager component name. We want it to match this name. So let's go ahead and set it there in the SKG firearm component. And we have our attachment manager. Now let's go ahead and add a SKG attachment component. And this is going to be for our actual attachments. So the attachment manager and attachment component work in tandem along with the firearm component. So this whole attachment system, though, is completely optional. So what I'm referring to is, let's say for SKG attachment, we add a default attachment of the red dot. When it adds that on begin play, it's going to go ahead and register the attachment component and the attachment, which is the red dot, with the attachment manager. And the attachment manager is going to go ahead and fire off delegates that the firearm component is bound to. So what that's going to do is basically going to trigger the firearm component to handle setting itself up with the attachments automatically. Now you can do that a separate way. And for example, if we have the firearm component, you can see we have add attachment and remove attachment that you can call. And that's basically what gets called whenever the attachment manager has an attachment added or removed. But the attachment manager also has a fair bit of helpers in it. So we can get all the attachments, get attachment by tag, we can by query, a bunch of other stuff that we can use with it. And same thing, we even have some additional helpers such as, hide all attachments, unhide, destroy all attachments, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of up to you as to whether or not you would benefit from it. If you're using an inventory system, such as, inventory framework plugin or Arc inventory, that kind of stuff, I wouldn't recommend using the attachment system provided at all. It's more than likely going to be getting in your way more than anything. But I can cover that more a little bit later. So what we're going to do is just get it set up. So let's select our attachment component and we can go through. So attach to mesh name. So what mesh on this actor do we want to attach to? We want it to be on the firearm. So that's going to be the skeletal mesh. So set that. And then the socket, we're just going to call it S underscore attachment underscore optic. So we need to make the socket on whatever mesh has this, name to it, which is the firearm. So we can open the firearm. You just select the root, add a socket called S underscore attachment underscore optic. And I'm going to add a preview of that red dot. What was that mesh called? So SMT4. So search for T4 site. So here's our red dot, just rotated 90 degrees. And I'm just going to set it, I'm going to set it above. I'm just going to make it float. That's fine. And save that. Compile and save the gun. And if memory serves right, that should be about all we need to make it spawn it by default. So if we hit play, you can see we have the red dot. And we are now aiming automatically with the red dot. So what we want to do is we want to get some, a proper reticle on there, because right now it's just that tiny little red dot. We can't actually see it. So what we can do just for the time being, go to the red dot. We can grab the hollow sight. No, what was it? Can't remember the name of the reticle. Oh yeah, that's right, because it's all configured separately. So yeah, never mind. We're going to come back to that. But yeah, so you can see it automatically goes through, spawns the attachment, and it registers itself, meaning we can aim with it. And if we play with clients, we can check it. You can see as client, we don't actually have the red dots. That's because we never set it to replicate. So let's make this multiplayer ready. We'll just enable replicates on the red dot. Now we can hit play again. And you can see we have red dots and they are aiming with the red dot. They're no longer aiming with the iron sights. But one thing you'll notice is if we try to walk, we are getting us, a real bad stutter. And that's due to the collision thing I talked about in, I think, the second, maybe third video. So if we go back to the red dot, select the mesh, we can come down here to collision and you can see it's set to block the pawn. And simply put, we don't want that. So we can do what we did with the gun and just make it have no collision, or we can make it a custom one to where it just ignores the pawn. But for now, we're going to use no collision, but we would be better off making a preset. But you can see now I can walk around and everything works the same. So in the next video, what we're going to end up doing is we're going to go through and set up the reticle settings and get this actually properly set up. And that way it's a, complete red dot. And then likewise, we're going to go through and cover the remaining settings later on. But for now, I want to focus on the procedurals. So when I was referring to the aiming distance and fixed aiming distance, if this is false, the aiming distance is going to be in addition to the normal aiming distance from the gun. So for example, let me go ahead and remove the default attachment. So right now with this, I don't know exactly how far this is from the rear sight, but let's pretend it is, we'll say 8 units, so 8 centimeters. If I put a red dot on, like so, and I have aiming distance set to 10, it's going to take that 8 units and add 10 on it. So we're now at 18 units. But if I were to set this to 0, it would be nothing addition. So you can see it's going to be the same distance as the normal iron sights, so the 8 units. Now when I turn use fixed aiming distance on and save that, now you can see I am inside of the glass. So that is without adding on to anything. This is the true fixed aiming distance. So regardless of where the attachment is, this is how close it's going to be to our face. So if I set it to 10, back to where it was, this will be 10 units away from the optic. And even if I move it way down the rail, such as down here, and I aim, you can see it still brings it right up to there. Versus if I uncheck use fixed aiming distance, you can see it's going to stay there and be pushed out another 10 units farther. So that's what those go through and do. So at some point or another, we're going to come through and make the aiming curves, but these go on the actual firearm itself, and likewise the aim speed and that kind of stuff. But moving on, actually, let me put this back about where it belonged, and I'm going to lower this to 2. So moving down, we have allow camera zoom. So if we enable this, we can change the zoom percentage. We'll make it, 5. And now when we aim, because we have our camera set up, it's going to aim and zoom the camera in with our aiming. So if I bump this up to something really high, say 50%, that's the aiming speed. So if I set the camera zoom to 50%, you can see it aims in quite a bit more. So that's where you can go through and you can tweak it. But anyhow, we're going to leave that off because that's personally something I don't really care for. But anyways, that is the basics of a red dot, and that is how you can make something aimable. You just need a procedural anim component, configure it, and you're good to go. So in the next video, we're going to go through and we're going to set up the reticles and all that kind of stuff. We're going to make it to where we can change reticles at runtime, all of that stuff. So I will see you then.